There's a big difference between architecture school and practicing as an architect. There's actually a huge difference between the two. In architecture school, it's all about the technical side of things. It's about learning, there's technical, there's design, there's, you actually make really important connections with lifelong friends. The professors are important. Like, there's all these things that you learn in school that are very different than practice. So let's start with that. So there's the technical stuff, learning how to draft, learning how to represent buildings to scale, learning about the sizes of certain spaces that need to be for it to function right, how to think about buildings and architecture, how to think about certain things. These are all skills that you acquire in architecture school. Then you have this whole aspect of design sensibility. Architecture school is for you to dive into creation of space and aesthetics and understanding that whole world. You got to get good at it. You have to be good at designing beautiful spaces, because what are we doing, kind of thing. So that's a huge aspect of it. And then there's like the bonds you make with lifelong friends in architecture, lifelong friends. And I can't stress that enough. My best friends are from architecture school. Let me just make this. And then professors, you get an academia side, this academia lens of architecture, of like theoretical things, things that were not built, things that did get built, critical thinking in that sense from the professors of what architectural big ideas are all about. In practice, it's very different, because there's this whole aspect of clients, consultants. Now, schools can try to mimic this, but we carry about 45 to 50 different projects at a given time. Each client, and there's a different client for each one. Each one is very different, and you have to be able to create some kind of architectural expression to their ideas. And without the client, there's no architecture. If there's no one paying for the job, there's no job. It's just the way it goes. There's like very rarely is there architectural sculpture, put it that way. There's almost always a client. And in that way, it's really tricky, because a good project requires a good client. And a visionary project requires a visionary client. The architect's vision is one thing, and you can try to convince an open-minded client with your vision. But the bigger part is listening to the client, distilling what they're saying, and producing an architectural manifestation of that thing. And so a client might say, I want my house to look like the underside of a boat on stilts with a giant flag on top, and make sure that we have a panoramic view of the lake or the ocean or whatever it is. It's the weirdest thing. It might be the weirdest thing. It's like, in my head, it's like, that's gonna look like a dog's breakfast. But then our role is to have discussions with the client, to figure out what the client is about, to figure out their lifestyle, their goals, their like why they want this particular thing. And so we can do that. We can design what they just mentioned, but if we can distill their ideas, we can come up with something way better that looks amazing, that has accomplished the underlying principles where those aesthetics have come from. It might be that he or she, the client might be like, I just love being on a boat, and blah, blah, blah. It might come up to a discussion of like, don't hire an architect, buy a boat. But it might come up to something like, what you might want to consider is this other thing. And it could manifest in a completely different kind of project. That's very different than architecture school. In architecture school, you are learning your craft. You're learning how to design stuff, how to pair things together, how to, have projects that don't look like a jumbly mess of things. And that's difficult in its own right. And it's a lot of soul searching and finding yourself and finding your design sensibilities, and on top of learning all the technical stuff. So it's just going to be late nights of practice to get yourself up to the ability and adequacy for the profession. You know, if you're not technically competent, it doesn't matter if you have the best designs. If you can't represent, if you can't somehow put together, I don't know how you'll survive in the early part of your career. Anyway, that's a little bit about the differences of architecture school and the actual profession. There's so many other things too. I can't even get into one video, but I hope it was a little enlightening. I enjoy school because it is vastly different than practice. And that's the message for today. Cheers. This is Architect on the Move. I'm Jason.